Awesome. Thank you. And thank you, Anita. Just real quick, remind me, we're going till 5 or 5:30?
Till 5. The Zoom has 5:30, but it just was a 2-hour set, but it's till 5.
No worries. I just wanted to make sure that I had the right thing. I can ramble. I can stall for time with the best of them. And then just so I'm clear, everybody should have, I don't know if you guys have your devices or you don't, but you should have like if you do have them, you have like one thing that looks like this, a little square, and the other one is actually circular.
If they're new teachers, they will not have their devices yet. I'm mailing them after this week. So if we can just, use the computer, the computer functionality, but they will not have their device.
Okay. And then for the second workshop, will they have their devices by then?
Yes. I'm mailing them out after this week. So yes.
Awesome. Okay. So we'll just stick to the online coding system first for today, which is actually really nice and makes it a lot easier because one of my devices is missing. Okay, so we're going to start with the micro bit, and I'm just going to share my screen real quick. Ooh, Anita, would you be able to enable screen sharing? There we go. Okay. So this here is the microbit, and just you can drop in the chat if you have any experience coding, just a yes or no. And if you have experience coding, maybe just say like what devices you've coded for, or programming languages you've used, or even if it's like really simple sweet newbies. I love it. And because you're new to coding, that actually makes this really fun. I love the microbit, and the Circuit Playground Express is actually not too different. We'll explore some of the differences between the two today. But there's two reasons why I love the microbit. Well, there's several. I'll list them off first. One, it's cheap. The microbit itself for this thing, usually with the kit, you get a little USB cord, and then you also get a battery pack that you can plug in. That whole thing runs about $14. And the Circuit Playground Express is just a little bit more expensive. Two, it's super packed with like features. You can see here from this image, right? There's 2 buttons on the front. There's LEDs. There's a radio and Bluetooth antenna. It's got its own processor. It's got a compass on board and an accelerometer, and the battery pack. And the newer ones, the microbit 2s, which we're not going to get into today, actually have a speaker on board too, so you can create music and play sounds. You can still make music through coding here. You would just have to attach your headphones to it the old-fashioned way. So just quickly, and you can unmute and just respond, or you can drop it in the chat, whatever you're comfortable with. What are some things you can think of, maybe thinking back to like features that your phone has that you might use, a compass or the accelerometer or some buttons for? And I'll kind of just give you a couple seconds, but we're just kind of brainstorming here. Ooh, collecting data in the environment. What kind of data are you thinking about? Hello, Renee. Thanks for joining.
Well, I'm not familiar with the microbit, but other, microcomputers and microcontrollers, you can do temperature, altitude, speed, things like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so you mentioned temperature. I don't know if you can do altitude on here, but you can do temperature with the microbit. We'll play with that a little bit, but the LEDs are interesting because not only do they display things, right? They turn on and off, so they emit light, but they also have the ability to collect temperature data through the LEDs. I don't quite understand how that works, but it's really interesting. So you can collect the temperature of the room, or hold it in your hands and it gets hot. So yeah, that's absolutely one of the cool features you can do.
And does the microbit, does it have sensors that attach to it, or this is
So
it?
yeah, so it has all of this stuff on board, but these at the bottom you see the 0, 1, 2, 3 volt and ground, and then you see all these little gold pins. So you can connect different sensors to those gold pins to expand on the capabilities. So over the summer, for instance, I worked with a bunch of teens and we built a soil moisture sensor system. And so it was just like, 2 nails with some electrodes connecting to the microbit. And the way that we had it made was so that when the soil becomes a certain level of dryness, meaning that there was a lack of moisture, it would turn on an automatic watering system. So, a couple of drops of water to keep the soil moist. So yeah, you can add all these different kinds of sensors to it externally, but it has a lot of that stuff on board. And so, especially with the first few weeks of just playing with it, you'll find that you might not even need that unless you have a very specific activity in mind. Does anybody else have any? You might have noticed that there's a radio and Bluetooth antenna on top, on the back of it. And so you can actually have 2 microbits communicate with each other. So I've seen code where you use one microbit to control the other one. So for instance, if it's attached to a car, you can use this as a kind of a joystick to control whether the car goes left and right. You can also send messages from one to the other. And I think that that's one of the activities that you'll do in the second workshop. So that's super cool. And you can also, there's a microbit app for your phone or tablet, and you can actually code on that and then use the Bluetooth antenna to transmit your code to the microbit. And I'll just warn now that part's a little bit more buggy. It's a little bit more experimental. So it just takes some finagling to make it work. But the whole point of learning through code is to prototype and iterate your process. So you do a little bit, test it out, do a little bit more, test it out, and then you keep going in that pattern. And so that's kind of what we're going to be doing today. Are there any questions about the features on board the device? This here is the code editing software. And we'll go into that in just a second. I'll drop a link in the chat. But I just kind of wanted to walk you through the interface first, and I'll give you a few minutes to play around with it. But you'll see on the left side of the screen is actually a virtual representation of the microbit. And so any code you drop on the right side, as soon as you finish editing that code, it'll automatically upload to the virtual microbit and then demo that stuff over on the left. So you can see on the right side, we just have a basic forever loop that will blink a heart. So the first set of LEDs here is a heart shape, and then the second one is no pixels are turned on. And so it'll just keep going from one to the other, back and forth forever. And so you'll see that this little heart will start blinking, and it'll actually do it just like it does in real life. So any code that you do on the right will impact on the left. So for instance, when we could try like a simple thermometer code, and you'll see it actually takes the temperature, but because it's virtual, you have to kind of set the temperature and then the microbit will read that. Okay, so let's get messing around. I'm gonna stop my screen share for a second. Hello, everybody. And I'm gonna drop the link for the make code. One of my favorite features of this website is that you don't need an account to log in. It saves all of your data to the browser. So in order to, basically save your code, you just press this little save icon in the corner, and I'll show you that in a second. But the next time you log in on your computer, all of your information is there, which has its pluses and minuses. On the negative side, right? If you go to somebody else's computer, there's no account there. So you won't have your information, your code over there. So that's just something that you have to kind of go into this expecting. So everybody open up the link that I just dropped in the chat, makecode.microbit.org, and it'll take you to the code editor. Let me share my screen again just in case. And you should start right away with something that looks like this. It'll load and you'll see like my projects. And there's a couple of things that I've done here. Right below the projects, you'll see some tutorials that you can get into. And I'll leave you some time in the next, in about a half hour to kind of mess around freely, and you can come back and check out these tutorials. But we'll just do a couple of things together just to get going so you have some familiarity. So there's tutorials, and then there's a few more advanced things that you can see, like it'll walk you through some instructions on how to develop these kinds of games or specific for radio. Some of these, like the fashion ones, they're a little bit more making intensive. So it's more like a physical computing exercise rather than just working with the microbit. So you can make a watch, you can make a step counter using that accelerometer. There's some music stuff. And so there's a whole bunch of stuff here, and you can invite your students to find this stuff. There's a lot of really good ways to get initiated with microbit. So for now, we're just going to click new project, and you can give your project a name. I'm just going to call it microbit with NMesa, and press create. So just like I was saying, on the left side, you'll see the little virtual microbit, and on the right side, you'll see your code area. And everybody should start with an on start block and a forever block. And you can delete them if you want. And if you delete them by accident, to bring them back, they're under the basic tab. But just a couple of things here you might notice if you've done coding before, especially with something like Scratch, or even if you've used microbit before, it starts in the drag and drop block based method, right? So each piece of code will fit into here like a Lego. On the other side, right, if you click at the very top, you see blocks, and this is JavaScript. You can convert all your code to JavaScript, and some students, I had a student over the summer who was super gung-ho on writing in JavaScript, even though he didn't know any JavaScript. And so I kept trying to tell him, like, why don't we go back to the block base and then convert it, and you can pick up some of the terminology that way. Excuse me. Okay, so we're going to start with some basic code. You'll notice all these tabs over on right in this middle column area. We have basic, input, music, LED, radio loops, logic, variables, math, and then there's some more under advanced, which we won't get to today. And there's some other tools that exist online that you can add extensions for that expand on the capabilities of the microbit, and that's under the extensions. But for now, we're just going to open up the basic tab. And let's just play with the LEDs for now. So you'll notice you can do show number, and that means that anything that you type in the show number, it'll just display it on here. You can do show LEDs, and you literally color in each block when you do it that way. You can also do show icons. So these are like pre-built drawings that you can use. You can do show string, which will allow you to put any characters in between the quotes, and it'll display that. If you notice, if you do that, and I'll just show you, we'll just grab the show string, and I'll do it in the forever, because if I do it on start, it'll only show it once. It'll say hello, and the screen's only big enough for like one character, and so you'll see it kind of scroll through. And so because I put it in forever, it'll just keep scrolling hello forever. So why don't we start with that? Grab a forever, the show string block under the basic tab, and drag it into the forever, and put whatever you want in there. We'll just start super simple, just so you get familiar with the interface. And for everybody who joined a little later, if you have any questions, feel free to drop it in the chat. If I'm going too fast, you can tell me to slow down. Feel free to unmute also. Because I'm sharing my screen, I can only see like 5 of you. So if you can just unmute and say, hey, Anthony, I have a question. I'm happy to address it. While you guys are working, I'll just kind of explain a couple of things. Sometimes I notice that people have a hard time connecting the blocks together. And so I'll just kind of show you really quickly. When you grab a block and you want to bring it over into connecting it to another block, you'll see it kind of like a little shadow will appear. And also you'll get this like, it highlights exactly where it's going to connect to. So I don't know if you can see right on my screen, but there's like right under this on start block, it's like a yellow highlight right where the two things connect. And as long as that's there, that means it's going to snap into place. So I can kind of have it, it's not like exactly where it's going to connect to. And as soon as I let it go, it pops right into place. So in this case, I threw a heart icon in there, the heart icon shows up, and then it jumps right into the hello. That's not super desirable. So I'm going to grab a pause block and drop that in right after the heart. So it's going to wait 100 milliseconds before hello shows up. And I also, let's see here. I don't like that it shows the hello right away. So I'm going to put a little space. Let's see what that does. Yeah, that's much more desirable for me. When you want to remove a block, I've got a couple of blocks stacked up. So things nest inside of loops, right? I have this forever loop and I have show string with nothing in it, and then show string with hello in it. If I wanted to pull out the show string with nothing, but leave the hello, I actually have to pull both of them out. And then I can disconnect the hello and put that right back into the forever loop. If I want to delete it, I can hover over it, click it and then press the delete button. But I can also drag it over to the middle column, like where I pulled the block from, and you'll see a little trash can icon pop up. And then when that appears, I can let it go and it's gone. Okay, I have a little challenge for you guys. It's been a few minutes of you playing around. If I wanted to do a really basic animation, just showing two different pictures, switching back and forth between the two, what blocks would I need to be able to do that? Why don't you guys try it first and then you can share out. Yeah, let's see. So the challenge again is if I wanted to make a very simple animation, just showing two different pictures, switching back and forth, which blocks would I need to be able to do that?
Is it the show icon?
Yeah, show icon, I can do two of those.
And pause.
And pause. So yeah, I'm gonna try that now. Let's see. Somebody wrote in the chat, let's see. Maybe two different show icons, maybe a string with a space between. Yeah, that's two different ways to do it. So you both said the show icon, and then one person said pause, and one person said a space between the two. There's one other important element that nobody's mentioned yet, and maybe that's because it's already on your screen.
They're very heavy.
The forever loop.
Yeah, forever loop. So I'll just show the difference. What if I just do it straight within my on start loop? What will happen if I do two icons and I'm going to switch this icon to like this smaller heart on start? It goes heart, little heart, and that's it. So if I wanted to just keep switching back and forth forever, then I would just move this all over to the forever loop. And
You know, that can do an entire stage, right? Like one of us could probably do your library stuff.
and there we go. Now we got a heart flipping back and forth. I'm going to just increase the time in the pause, and you'll see it takes a while to switch to the small heart and really fast to switch back to the big heart. Okay. I'm going to show you a couple of more features. I'm going to clear all this stuff out. Real quick with the show LEDs, right? If I want to draw something, I can draw literally whatever I want. I'm just clicking each LED on and off. So I have the letter E, right? And I can keep doing this. And I can kind of make my own weird nonsensical animation just by doing that and changing the pixels on the display. And so that's just another way of manipulating the LEDs. Under basic, there's a couple other features. This show arrow block, that's actually relatively new. So I can do forever. And right now it's just defaulted to show arrow north. And if you notice that this north is actually a different color, that's because it's predefined as north, northeast, east, southeast, but this is technically a variable, meaning I could put anything into that spot that has that round shape, and it would show that thing. But in this case, it's just a really simple up arrow because north on my computer is that way. Okay, so right now we haven't done anything super exciting, but I'm going to show you some features that'll allow you to make your microbit a little bit more interactive. So we have some more loops here, right? These under the input tab, they have the same structure of the loop, except these have different features. And so just real quick, Rhonda, you and I were talking earlier about using the pins, right? So there's this on pin P0 press, right? So you can actually press on that 0 pin and have code designed to do something when you press on that pin. And you can change it to any one of these pins, 1 and 2. And technically each one of these little ones are actually its own pin. So if I hover my mouse over it, the one I'm on right now just says P11 button B. Because it's so small, you can't really put your finger on it. You technically can, but it won't work because you're also connecting to the other two that are around it. But you can code stuff to happen to connect. When anything is connected to these pins, you can code stuff specific to that stuff. So I just wanted to show you that real quick. But for now, let's grab this like on button you pressed. And in just a minute, I'll give you free time to play with the on shake one too. That uses the accelerometer feature that we were talking about. So in my on start loop, let's just say I want to, I'm going to initialize, just show number 0. Then when I press the A button, let's see if I can do this. I want it to actually take temperature. So when the A button is pressed, I'm going to use the show number again, and I'm going to drop that temperature variable in. So that was under input, and I just scrolled down until I saw the temperature variable. Remember earlier I said that anything that had that shape will fit into that spot. So I'm going to stick it in, and like I said before, you see this, it's like highlighted yellow, and in this case, there's a little 2 red dots connecting each other. So when I let that go, it'll drop into that spot. And so once my microbit adjusts, if I press the A button here, it'll take the temperature. And it says right now it's set for 21 degrees. If I change that and press A again, it'll now read 42. So now we're starting to build a little bit of interactiveness, right? It's not just code that's happening. The user, your student or yourself in this case, is directing what happens with the microbit. And you might want to play a little bit with the other features that are here. So if you notice, right, under these input blocks, you have light level, compass heading, and temperature and acceleration. These are all kind of changing variables. So if I shake the microbit, it would read an acceleration number. If I cover the microbit, it reads the light level, it'll read the temperature. And if I rotate it, right, then it reads the compass. So these are all different variables. These other ones, these like diamond shaped ones kind of, those are logic blocks. And so whenever something happens, it reads out whether it's a yes or a no, whether it's an on or an off, right? So if I use this button A is pressed thing, I would need to use one of these logic blocks. If true, right, then I can put this in here. So if button A is pressed, then do this bit of code. And I could like literally just stick this into my forever loop and drop this in here and achieve basically the same thing. So the ones that are like diamond shapes, remember, are logic. So it's a yes or a no. I think the term is technically Boolean. And then the rounded ones, they're variables. They could be a whole range of any given number. So I think I've talked for enough. I'll let you guys mess around a little bit with the A button press or the on shake and just see what happens. Stick some stuff in there, see if you can get some code going. Maybe start your microbit, with a little welcome screen every time you turn your computer on, right? Something happens, it greets you essentially. And then add some interactivity. When the A button is pressed, you'll notice if I click the arrow, there's A button, B button, or A and B at the same time. Or I can use this on shake. And when you click that drop down, you get a whole other set of ways to interact with it. I can shake it. I can aim the logo up. I can tilt it left and right. And I just want to show you, if you want to test it, once you use that thing on the microbit, when you hover your mouse over it, it actually moves to the left and the right. So you can kind of like direct something to happen on the code. So let's see here. It's 4:05. Let's take about 15 minutes to kind of just mess around. And if you have any questions, if you have any trouble, I'm here to help talk through it. I'll stop sharing my screen for now so you have control of your desktop. And I'm just gonna munch on my French fries. How are we doing so far? Thumbs up if you're doing okay. Sweet. Does anybody have any questions?
Can we test the sound here?
Say that again. Did you ask about the sound?
Yes.
You can try it. Are you trying it and having issues with it?
Yeah.
Yeah, so what's your question with the sound?
Well, I'm just trying this on loud sound. And I just put the um, oh, wait a minute. I don't know if this is right. Show string hello,
Mm-hmm.
because I want to hear if, you know.
Yeah, so I don't know how you can, well, I'll just try it. Let's see here. I'm putting that on loud sound into here. So that's an input, right? If I
Mhm.
make sound larger than a certain value, and most of the values within the microbit range from 0 to 255, I think. So if I use that on loud sound, and this only really works for the microbit version 2,
Mm,
you should be able to have it do something. So you said show string, right? And you put a
Yeah.
string in there.
yeah.
So let's see here. Okay, so for me, let me share my screen so you can see it.
All right.
I don't know how microbit defines loud,
Mm,
but if I take this little bar here, this, if you notice, it has a little microphone icon. If
yeah.
I raise it up to a certain point at about what was that, like 170 or so, is when it starts to show my string of hello. So the sound has to be louder than that value. Below that, like I have at 145 right now,
Oh, okay.
and it's not doing anything.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Thank
So
you.
so you could, in your code, right, you could have that on loud sound, and basically you could do like a clap, which is a pretty loud sound,
Mhm.
and then it'll do something based on that clap.
Okay.
Another good one to demonstrate is, let's see here. I'm going to go back to my inputs, and I'm going to use this light level. And so instead of like on a button press, I'm going to say, so I'm going to do a little logic here, right? So I want it just like the loud. I want it, if it's above a certain value, I want it to do something. So I got to grab this comparison, and you notice it has the same shape, right? So I'm going to say if light level is, I'm going to say greater than or equal to, and I'm just going to arbitrarily pick like 160. So it's got to be kind of bright, and I'm going to stick it in here. Right, so if it's greater than or equal to 160, then I want it to say shut the light.
Mhm.
And so you notice here now I have this little 128 thing, right? So right now it's low. I'm gonna actually take this out.
Yeah.
Right now it's lower than my designated value. I can increase it to 160, meaning it's bright, and then it says shut the light. And you can also have it make a noise, right? If you want it to be some kind of auditory thing. Or in this case, I can use like, let's see, if I use show LEDs, I'm gonna do show icon. Let's see, there's some faces in here. Here we go. So I'm gonna have this sleeping face, and then I'm gonna add this one here, and it's gonna be the big surprise face. So it's kind of sleeping, and then it's all of a sudden somebody turns the lights on and shut the light, and my face shows up. So a really fun challenge that you can do is we have them make little microbit pets, and they like code some like reactions to their microbit and just add some simple ways to interact with the actual device, right? So if you shake it, what kind of reactions would your pet have if you shake it? Does it like that? Does it not like that? You know, if you talk loudly near it, if you said shh, does that have an effect? Let's see. Leslie said, I have a line that won't move. However, I'm pretty proud I was able to create the line. Nice. What kind of, what do you mean? You just drew a line using the show LED, or did you do something else? I think Leslie froze. We're almost at the halfway point, and I'm going to give you guys some time to play with the Circuit Playground Express. There's not a whole lot of difference between the two, except for just the features. So we'll spend a little bit more time here, and then we'll save the last half hour for the Circuit Playground Express. So for the next 15 minutes, I'll let you guys mess around. If you want, you can try to do the microbit pet, or you can walk through one of the tutorial if you want to. Does anybody have any code that they want to demo? Just show what they've been working on. No pressure, and it's all iterative, right? So we're all just learning and figuring it out. So whatever you show is amazing. Let me ask this. Would you guys rather have the next 15 minutes to mess around and do whatever you want? Or would you rather spend the next 15 minutes working towards some project, like some short project like the pet? And we can kind of talk through that.
Yeah, can we try that? The pet?
Sure.
I don't know for the other participant if that's what I wanted to do.
Well, I've already got 2-3 votes for the pet. I think I saw Renee. Yeah, he's got his hand up. Cool. Okay. Pet is fine with me. So usually for this kind of stuff, I always start by just having everybody identify some things that they want their pet to be able to do. And so just for the purposes of this activity, just write in the chat something really simple that you can think about. Okay, so what are some features of your pet, right? Every pet I've ever had has a face. So maybe you want a face. If anybody remembers like the old Tamagotchis or the little Pikachu that you had, we can picture that and work towards something like that. So maybe your pet needs to eat. Maybe it needs to go to the bathroom. Maybe it needs to go to sleep. What are some of the features? Yeah, exactly. Leslie wrote face to blink eyes. There we go. What other kinds of things do you want your pet to have?
To jump?
Okay, you can make it jump. So maybe you can somehow feed it and it responds. That's a good one. So using the show LEDs or the show icon, design your pet just so that you have some like, in video games. Oh, Stephanie says, could it roll? You could try to make it roll. Make a sound. There we go. In video games, right? If your character just stands there for 5 minutes, eventually he has some like resting animation. So right now I'm just thinking, let's just make our resting animation. So if you wanted to have a face, what's your normal resting face? Is it a happy face? Is it just that like sleepy face that I showed earlier? Design that. You could also just, you know, use your show LEDs to have it, you know, to have like a whole little body. There's not quite, it's only 5x5, so you couldn't do like a full-on Pikachu. But maybe you could do some representation of it. I remember commercials growing up for pet rocks, which I thought were the dumbest pets ever. But in this case, a pet rock actually is probably not a bad idea. Or maybe you could make like a little squishy blob thing. So after you have, I'm not going to share my screen just so that you guys don't get dominated by the Zoom. So after you have like your resting thing, I'll tell you this one thing. If you design that for the on start, you have to remember to also put it in the forever loop. Because once you do some other action, your initial resting animation or, you know, design will just go away. So if you put it back in the forever loop, then when you do an action, it'll go back to the forever loop while that interaction is not happening. So for instance, if my code says when I press button A, you know, that basically starts my feeding animation. After the feeding is over, right, I wanted to jump back into my resting animation. So that's where the forever loop comes in handy. Otherwise, it will just be in the feeding animation forever. So once you do your first bit of animation, then start building in interactions one at a time. Maybe start with a button press or the on shake feature. And then after you get that code working, try adding another interaction, a different interaction. So Jennifer, you wrote Make a Sound. And I'm specifically calling you out because the Make a Sound feature is interesting. If you have the version 1, which I think is what you're getting, which is what I have, there's no onboard speaker. So you'd have to connect a little speaker or headphones to the device. In this case, you can use the music output to kind of play a tone, and it might automatically default to, let me just test it real quick. Yeah, so when I put a tone in my forever loop, it'll just play a sound through my speakers as if my microbit has a speaker. But just know that the version 2s actually have a speaker on board. It's on the back, so it'll just do that automatically. But on the version 1s, you have to connect the headphones. And luckily, the Make Code software, when you add that sound, will show you how to connect the headphones.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Yeah, Mark said he also doesn't have a speaker built in. Has anybody been playing with the music feature a lot? Sort of. There's a few things you can do with the music. If you're teaching this to whole class of people in person. Once they start using the music, it'll play the music nonstop on the computers. And so unless they like, I don't know if you have to have your speakers turned on or anything like that. I'm just going to share my screen real quick. It might get really annoying. So just note that usually what we do is we turn the speakers off on our computers or make them plug in headphones because they kind of zone out while they're working on their code. But there's just a couple things I want to show you. So if you click in the music tab, right, you'll see play melody, and these are predefined. Oh, sorry, not the play melody. This one works kind of like the show LED, and you can literally like draw your own music, which is super fun. And so if I press play, then it'll just play that pattern. And because I put it in my forever loop, it'll just keep playing that pattern forever. So there's that. Then there's the play tone, which plays literally just one note. And so you could construct a whole song like you would in animation, right? You just layer all the play tones, and then it would just go down the list until there's no more notes. The other thing that you can do, here it is. There's these predefined melodies already existing. So this one says start melody, and this is da-dum. And so you can literally put that in here and change it. So this is kind of like the show icon version of music, right? There's pre-made beats, and beats isn't the right word, but that's close enough. There's pre-made like music strings, and you just pick it and it'll just start playing it. So you could have like, you know, for your pet, you could try these start melodies and have that be like your reaction to something. So we have about 5 minutes before we switch over. Now 4. So I'll give you kind of time to kind of wrap up, and then we'll talk about saving and move on. Has anybody tried a feature that I haven't talked about yet? The photos feature, I actually haven't used that. Is that under advanced images? Let's see here. So this is a bit weird. And I haven't actually quite figured out how to use it, but you can create an image, and you can also create a bigger image, and that will like scroll. So it'll like kind of scroll across the screen. But if you notice that the shape is circular, so it's also a variable. So you could, the way I think it works, and I haven't really used it all that much, is that you could have like a whole library of these images and then like call them later. So like if you're making a game, for instance, you would want to be able to switch between these different pre-made images. Tutorial on the pet hamster. Nice. Okay, there's 1 minute left. And there's a whole lot of things to discover within the code base here. But one thing I wanted to show you or talk to you about, especially because somebody mentioned this earlier, talking about connecting different sensors. It's not just sensors, right? So the microbit itself, you connect things through ground and maybe like the 3 volts pin and maybe one of the numbers, and that'll allow you to get some control. So one, the 3 volts allows you to supply power to some device, and using the other pins allows you to send data. So if you have like little servo motors connecting to 3 different pins, the ground, the 3 volts, and 0, 1, or 2, will allow you to control that servo. So 1, it turns on, and 2, then you could tell the servo how far to rotate. So the servo usually has a rotating knob on the top, and you can direct it. And so some servos are continuous, meaning that they'll always just keep spinning, and then you tell it for how long to spin. And some servos, continuous isn't the right word, I can't remember what they're called, but you direct the angle on them. So they usually rotate between 0 and 180 degrees, and you say rotate 90 degrees, or rotate 120 degrees, or rotate 5 degrees. And you could do it, it works in the other direction too. So then you could have something we created one time this like arm that would draw in a maze, and so you could tell it how far to rotate so that it would keep the pencil sort of close. But that's another thing to check out, is messing around with the servo motors. But there's way more to this than we could possibly do in an hour. Luckily, we have another workshop for you. Does anybody have any questions before we start moving on? All right. Just real quick, let's see. I need Zoom to move out of my way so I can access the bottom of my screen. When we started this program, right, you might have named the program. In this case, I called mine Microbit with New Mexico Mesa. And if I click the little disk here, I can click it and it'll save and it'll download it to my computer. So now I also have a local version of it. You don't need to click the little disk icon to save it to your browser. It does that automatically when you make changes to the code. So next time, you'll actually connect devices to the computer, and we'll walk through how to transfer files. Now it's made much easier. It used to be very complicated. Well, it was pretty easy. It just sounded like a lot of steps. But here, you can actually, it pairs your microbit to your computer when it's connected. And so when you click the save button, it'll automatically transfer it over to the microbit. So it's a little simpler now. And when you do that, all it needs is a power source to do the code that you just uploaded. And so with the USB cable that you'll get, that'll supply the power, or you can connect the battery pack, which will allow you to kind of like take your device on the go. All right, so we are going to switch over to the Circuit Playground Express. And let me share my screen one more time. So the code infrastructure that we were just using, MakeCode, is developed by Microsoft. And there's actually a whole bunch of devices that the MakeCode software works with. And usually you just type in the name of the device. So in this case, the link that I sent you is makecode.microbit.org. right? And we're about to use the Adafruit Circuit Playground Express. And so for that one, it's makecode.adafruit.com. But if you ever use like an Arduino LilyPad, there's a Adafruit, there's a MakeCode version of that. There's a whole bunch of devices that exist within the MakeCode framework. And so the coding for it is actually pretty similar. You can start in block-based form and you can convert over to JavaScript. And since you guys don't have it yet, let me just share my screen so you can see what this device looks like before we hop over to the actual MakeCode editor. So this one is round, and you notice that there are LEDs on the screen, right? But it's not arranged in a grid-like form, so you can't really draw pictures, but you could do more exciting light displays, essentially. So these LEDs are called Neopixels, and they're not basic RGB, but they do have 3 colors. So you program exactly a range of values, and I think it's hexadecimal, but we can double check. You program a range of values and you can make it any color you want, essentially. So you notice on here, it's like a range of green to blue to pink to red. Just like the microbit, there are pins, but these are arranged on the outside. And so in this case, you connect alligator clips around the edge of the device. And you can also, if you have conductive thread, you can take this thing and sew it directly onto like fabric to make like wearable tech. And just like the microbit, there's a whole bunch of sensors on board. So there's 2 buttons, left and a right. There's a speaker on this one. There's a microphone as well, which is on the version 2 for the microbit. There's a light sensor, a temperature sensor, and I thought that there was a compass, but it doesn't look like it. Motion sensor for the accelerometer. So it's pretty similar, although, not everything is the same. So it really depends on like what application you or your students want to make in order for you to choose which one you're going to design for. But just like with the previous one, right? So the microbits that we all have that you guys are going to get won't have the speaker. So if you want to do more sound stuff, this device might be the one that you want to choose. And so let me just stop sharing real quick. Just like before, I'm going to send you the link for the MakeCode editor. And you'll notice that the infrastructure is pretty much all the same, right? So when you first go to the website, I think I sent you the link with the word editor in it, so it might take you straight to the editor. But normally when you first go there, you see exactly what you see in the microbit. You see the projects, you see tutorials, you see Cartoon Network, there's some other activities and things that you can do here as well. If you happen to do the code.org computer science discoveries, then you'll be using Circuit Playground within that curriculum. So in this case, once you go here, you can either open up a new project. I already have an untitled one that I had started before, so I'll just reopen that one. And just like earlier, you got, it's block-based, right? You see the forever loop. You see the virtual Circuit Playground over on the side. And right in the middle, you have all of your the tabs for each category of blocks, right? So in the beginning, this one, instead of it being basic, right, it's all the light stuff. And so here I'm just going to start with the show ring. And so it'll start by turning them all red, which it is. If you look in my virtual area, all of my Neopixels are red. And I can click one and kind of just go through the screen. If I click each one, it'll switch from green to off, gray is off, because my green is selected. And I can kind of just pick a different color on the color wheel and change it to that. So maybe I want like every other one to be purple. And then I want like every other one that's not purple to be blue. And I got this like ultraviolet thing going. And if you want to do like an animation like before, you could basically just do the show ring. There we go. Over and over again. So when I do that, it's just kind of flashing between my violet hues and my red hues. There's also a show animation block. And this is like a pre-built animation, kind of like the show icon. And I wonder if this will work. Let's see. So it should flash blue and purple and then red, and then it should run this animation for 500 milliseconds. And it looks like it froze. Or it's having a really hard time loading. There we go. So now it's just kind of running this like ring of lights. It reminds me of the Mac spinning wheel of death. So you should be sort of familiar with this. I know it's not the same on this one as it is on the microbit, but we had like 40 minutes to play over there. So I'll give you guys kind of like 10 minutes to just mess around and see what you can discover, because things are going to be different. So see what you can find. And I'm here if you have any questions.
Hey, Anthony, can I ask what would the application be as far as for the Circuit Playground Express using the math functions? How would you use a math function in the Circuit Playground?
Oh, interesting question. So in this case, let me see here. The logic is still true. So a lot of the math I can see, well, one, there's a pick random variable. So you would be having the Circuit Playground do some of the math. So like on the microbit, right, it's super obvious that you could like have it do the math and display the result. And here there's no screen for you to display it. You could attribute like numbers, for instance. Sorry, you could attribute colors to numbers. So for instance, let's say I wanted to like measure the volume of the sound in the room, right? I could set it up so that when it hits a certain value, it displays maybe red on 2 of the lights. And then when it's louder than that, it does 3. And then when it's louder than that, it does 4 all the way around. So it's still doing those mathematical processes, and then just kind of displaying it in like a different way that sort of makes sense for the device itself. And at the same time, you can have it do math to do logic, right? So let's say you needed to do a certain calculation, right? And if it's greater than this value, then it does something. So maybe it turns all the lights on, or it plays a sound based on the math that you have it doing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you. Good example.
Yeah. So you can do some of that same stuff with the microbit. But with the microbit, you have that advantage of being able to like just display exactly what that value is. And I suppose you could do the same thing here, but you'd have to be able to like know what color corresponds to which number. Thanks for that question, Kristen. I was actually going to ask, what are some of the differences that you all notice in terms of the code and functionality of the Circuit Playground Express? One thing that I kind of found quickly, but it was by accident, was since we were talking about the loud function as an input on the microbit, I noticed that in Circuit Playground, you can actually set, there's a function if you go under music and scroll down toward the bottom. Where is it now? I lost it. Maybe it's under input. Oh yeah, it's under input. I'm sorry. So if you go under input and then go down to the bottom, there's a block that says set loud sound threshold. So before, remember, we had to kind of say like, we had to test it to see that it was around 170 was the threshold. But here you could drop this block at the top of your code and say the loud sound threshold is, maybe it's 50. So maybe you could do like a little clap, or you could set it to 200 and it'd be a big clap, right? And so you can set that threshold so that when your loud sound happens, it'll, do something based on what you determine and not some kind of arbitrary value. there's a sort of obvious, let's see here. I definitely seems like you can make more minute, smaller alterations in the code. Yeah, I think just by its nature, the circuit playground seems to give you way more control. It's a bit more manual in that regard. We were talking with the microbit, right, about communication. And so the microbit, you can communicate via Bluetooth. And on the circuit playground, there's this function. I haven't used this at all. And I actually think it's new because I've never noticed it before. That's called network. And you can use infrared signals like your TV remote to send numbers. And so basically when you do that, right? Let me actually see what it does. I wonder if two pop up. I'm gonna just share my screen. We're gonna learn together. This could totally flop though. Okay, so I grabbed this on infrared receive number and I'm gonna do infrared send number here. And maybe I don't want to do it on forever. I'm gonna do a on button A. Then I'm gonna drop this in there. And I'm gonna say long click. So basically you have to press it for a second or so. So if I press this A button, right, long click, it should send, bam, there it is. It should send a signal to this second circuit playground here. Sorry, I'm losing my nouns today. And if I have any code in this on infrared received number block, right? So right now, it's just any number. If it receives a number, it'll do it. If I put any code in there, once it receives the number, then it should do, the second one should do something. So maybe in this case, I'll change the animation and let's just see what happens. Show animation. We'll do this one. No idea what it's going to do. So it's going to load. I'm going to long click. Second one pops up. Let's see here. It's doing the same animation. Let's stop that for a second. And so the reason why I stopped it is just so that I can see if there's any changes. So I'm going to press the button again. All right, and I noticed that when I do that, I don't know if you guys can see it, but this tiny little box here lights up when I hold down the button. And I did it just right, and I don't know if you guys saw it, but my message was received over here. So this says that it's thinking and that it's sending a signal. And so somewhere on here is an infrared thing. That might be what this thing is here. And it cued that animation. So you can actually have it work just like a TV remote, send wireless infrared signals. Whereas on the other one, it's a Bluetooth signal. So it's just different light. That's all. So we have about 5 more minutes, and I want to be respectful of your time. So are there any questions? Any other questions that you guys have for me while we're here? You're all just hyper focused on your code. I love it.
Well, if nobody has any questions, I do want to make a note that if you've had a chance to look through our MESA curriculum that we have posted, as MESA advisors, you guys can access. There are a few lessons in there that have to deal with microbits. If you want to, explore a little bit more, there, a few lessons that have already been developed that are included in there. And the microbit, again, with going through all those different tutorials, you can learn, just to play a little bit more from there. But there are, again, a few lessons that you could do or I know even just from feedback from teachers, using this microbit Circuit Playground Express versus say an Arduino, because they're able to use the online functionality. So maybe not everyone in your class needs a microbit at the beginning if you're just working through, you know, you're doing sketches, you're working through. A lot of your students can work at the same time. You're also able to play and manipulate with some code before actually transferring it over to the microcontroller itself.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That's one of the best parts about the Make code is because it has that little virtual device, right? You can code and test it out right there, which helps with the troubleshooting part, right? When you transfer the code over, sometimes it glitches and it doesn't transfer properly. So you can test the code to make sure that it's working on the virtual device and then send it over and then troubleshoot on that side as well.
And I did go ahead and put in the chat the attendance survey link, stipend, whatnot. If this is your first workshop, you'll indicate which kit you would like to receive. If you attended yesterday, you might have already given that option, but I will be doing our first mailing of kits next week. And then if you attend more than 3 sessions, you're eligible for a second kit. So, you know, kind of be thinking about that if you want to attend any other sessions during our series. But are there any last questions for either myself or Anthony before we log out?